and Howie Severino of GMA 7 Network. Our session will be moderated by Maitel Ladrido of Ateneo de Manila University.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first session for this afternoon. Researchers have examined the question, the evolution of mediated forms such as news, and also the practices involved in the production of such forms. One key theme of these studies is how media, as channels of information, have become inextricably linked to citizenship and good governance. In a liberal democracy that idealizes its citizens as informed enough to participate in their governance, a free and responsible media are key to participative governance. During the broadcasting era, when media institutions and their professionals tended to control the flows of information, propagandist and disinformative efforts were relatively easy to spot and prevent. And the main challenges of media credibility were the integrity and honesty of the professionals and organizations themselves. However, in the current and complex network landscape, the origins of disinformation are much more difficult to spot and prevent, with consequences that extend beyond media professions but to our ability to participate in our own governance. To further our own understanding of how disinformation works against democracy and media credibility, we have representatives of the media. Let me introduce you to them again. John Neri, Editor-in-Chief of Inquirer.net and opinion columnist for the Philippine Daily Inquirer. Maria Ressa, CEO and Executive Editor of Rappler. And Howie Severino, Vice President for Multimedia Journalism and also Vice President for Professional Development for GMA Network Incorporated. So our panelists will present some ideas first before we go into the discussion. Begin with John.
Thank you. I am no longer editor-in-chief of Inquirer.net. My secondment ended last May, but I had a terrific time working for almost 3 years with the online affiliate of the Inquirer. I'm an associate editor and columnist at the Philippine Daily Inquirer. I'd like to start, I don't have anything prepared to show you. I'd just like to start by quoting something from President Duterte, because I think that there is a very basic kind of disinformation that's making the rounds, and that is that press freedom is a privilege rather than a right. I think in the first panel this morning, Ron Habal was the one who said, what should we do? And we should do a Pia Ranada, stand our ground. The last time Pia did this, the president spluttered and said this: "Look, why should you complain if I am critical against media? Are you not critical of me? Don't abuse it," meaning press freedom. "Don't abuse it too much. It's a privilege in a democratic state. You have overused and abused that privilege in the guise of press freedom." I think we know what the president means here. He's ostensibly asking for greater responsibility in the use of the resources available to the press, to the media in general. But I think we also know what the president really meant here. And that is that he can, if he wants to, revoke a media organization's privilege to operate, because it is, in his view, a privilege rather than a right in a democratic state. I think it is important for us to stress that the president is wrong. Press freedom is not a privilege in a democratic state. It is a right. It is a right guaranteed by our own Constitution. And more important, it is a right enshrined in our own freedom struggle. Our heroes fought for press freedom. Jose Rizal, according to the great historian Father John Schumacher, was already a separatist. He wanted to separate the Philippines from Mother Spain as early as the mid-1880s. But he could not yet write that down. What he could write, as he did in La Solidaridad, was to ask for two reforms: representation in the Spanish Cortes and a free press. So, and he has not only acted on that, he has as we all know, he wrote for La Solidaridad, for España and Filipinas. The other heroes also wrote for Solidaridad during the in the run-up to the revolution. We had one issue of Kalayaan, published by Andres Bonifacio and Emilio Jacinto. During the war against the Americans, we had La Independencia. I mean, this is something that goes all the way back to our history. Nobody should tell us otherwise, that press freedom is not, in fact, a right. Thank you.
Okay, next we'll have Howie.
All right, before I say anything, I want to tip my hat to John Neri, the moving force and the main organizer of this conference. Actually, a few weeks ago when he first mentioned this and holding it in Ateneo and considering foreign speakers and inviting so many people, I was one of the skeptics. But here we all are, and you've proven the skeptics wrong, John, again. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for having me. If we can go to, I need a short PowerPoint, otherwise I'm going to start to ramble. So Stephen, if you can just start my PowerPoint. Part of my role, actually I'm just Vice President for Professional Development now. Part of my role at GMA is not just to discuss these kinds of larger issues, but also to educate our backyard. I was telling Maitel earlier that if we're going to talk about this, we need to make sure that everyone in our own organizations are on board. We can't be talking about this outside of our own organizations if our own personnel are actually sharing and believing fake news. And when I say our personnel at GMA Network, it's not just journalists, but maintenance people, marketing, people in technology, people working in the legal department, et cetera, et cetera. All of us are using social media and encountering false information. So my presentation is a very abridged form of what I've been sharing with my colleagues, not just in journalism, but at GMA Network, many of whom are not journalists. So, sa totoo lang, actually, one of the things I like about this conference is you didn't title it fake news, okay? Which is problematic, as other speakers have pointed out. And I like calling, it's not not sexified. Disinformation is not a sexy word. It sounds a very like a robotic word or academic word. But our programming at GMA is almost all in Filipino, so we had to think of a kind of a term for it, and I am not sure who coined this term, but if you can, Steven, if you can go to the next. So sa totoo lang, huwag sa malita. Okay, so sa totoo lang for the non-Filipino speakers, so sa totoo lang, the truth is not fake news. So malita, again, it's a combination of mali and balita. Balita is news in Filipino. So this has been our theme in a lot of our presentations. Actually, we started doing this campaign internally at GMA shortly after I came from an international conference when I realized how big a problem this was getting. And then since then, if you can go to the next slide, Steve, it's become kind of a term on everyone's lips, including these two people. Next, please. Clarissa David mentioned Senate hearings that have been going on. There have been 2 hearings, and people have been dismayed by it's been personality-driven rather than mostly issue-driven by these particularly people like them. But I like the fact that it's also started conversations, a lot of conversations about issues like conflicts of interest, platforms, telcos, the role of Facebook, etc. Okay, next, please. Okay. GMA Network is not just a disseminator of information and sometimes a gateway of fake news, sometimes if they can get away with it. But we've also been victimized, okay? I started with this. It says gmanews.tv, but it's not what it says it is. Next, please. It's a fake GMA News website, okay? It looks just like the real thing. Next, please. This is the real thing. Next. All right, this is the real. This is just this morning. So if you notice, it has the little heart. It's got the same colors, etc. If you're not a regular reader of GMA News online, it's very easily to be fooled. Very easy to be fooled. Next, please. So back to this is the fake news website. Back to one of its most popular articles, which basically lays the blame of the Marawi crisis on certain figures identified with the opposition or critics of the government. FVR, Lenny Robredo, Loreto Rosales, and Laila de Lima. International communities link these figures with the Marawi attacks. Obviously, most people, I guess, in this room wouldn't believe this, but this was shared. Next, please. This was shared over 10,000 times. Okay, so we started noticing back in May. This came out shortly after the Marawi crisis, and it says May 29 over here. It erupted in May, and it started gaining traction all over the world, shared by a lot of OFWs. So we were wondering what to do. So we said we didn't want to drive even more eyeballs or traffic to the same fake news content. What would be the point of that? So we formulated this advisory. Next, please. This is in Filipino, but basically it says a reminder from GMA News: there is wrong information or wrong news or fake news that's spreading using a URL that's very similar to GMA News Online. We want to remind you that the real links to our news sites are the following. Okay, so notice it's definitely unsexified. And next, please. This was shared 52 times. Okay, so. So you have a sense of what we're up against. The fake news was spread thousands and thousands of times. Our advisory, warning people about it, was shared just 52 times. And then, I was reminded of this again when someone was talking about how do you sexify factual information. Well, GMA Network has to do a much better job of sexifying a warning like this, okay? Okay, next, please. Okay, just to remind everyone of our own URL, notice that they didn't just make the colors and the logo very similar to the real logo, but even the URLs. They know that some people are starting to look at URLs to tell fake from real, and even the URLs are very similar. And you know how easy it is to buy these domains, okay? So when we talk to our personnel and other people about fake news, we always tell them, look at the URL, but you have to remember what the real URLs are, and that's much easier said than done. Next, please. Okay, so what did we do finally? So we couldn't stop the spread with that very unsexy advisory. So we took legal action sometime, I think in June. Luckily, the service provider of the fake news account, or fake news site, we traced to California. The United States takes legal demands much more seriously, and soon after we sent them a letter and we provided proof of copyright. The website could no longer be accessed. I know that there are other fake news sites out there. Al Jazeera is one, and almost all of us who belong to mainstream news sites, we've had false or fake news sites of our own sites. And some of these sites are hosted in places like Namibia, Ukraine, places that may not be as responsive to legal demands. Okay, next, please. All right, one thing I've been pointing out to my scholar friends is we need to speed up the research on fake news and its effect. No? And I know that a lot of my colleagues at Ateneo, LaSalle, UP, etc., are working on such research. But in the meantime, last year, this came out from Columbia University. And I often use it to try to understand this phenomenon. It's online if you're interested. It was based on thousands of examples and a lot of surveys of news users. But I just want to share a couple of takeaways very quickly. Next, please. One is Craig Silverman is the main author. He's a BuzzFeed journalist. He's also a researcher. He said disinformation is often more viral and spreads with greater frequency than corrective information, which helps explain why our advisory was spread just 52 times and the fake news was spread thousands and thousands of times. Next, please. All right, and this is interesting, the backfire effect, because one thing we've noticed and we've discussed with among colleagues is that there's so much that has already been published and and aired about, for example, all the injustices related to the drug war, all the killing and violence, and even and propaganda and lies, and yet people still believe a false narrative about the drug war. And we're trying to figure out, are people really interested in facts or the truth? And he's saying, well, there's a backfire effect. If you really bought into the drug war from the beginning, chances are even facts aren't going to make any dent into what you believe. Next, please. All right, this is one effect of all of this false information. You've probably seen this. This is a recent report based on a survey by Ipsos survey company. Ipsos is a survey company affiliated with Thomson Reuters, which is a reputable brand in the news business. And basically it says Philippines among countries most ignorant of key issues. The key issues are not just about politics, but about crime, religion, LGBT issues, vaccines, just basic things that are common knowledge in other countries. We were, next please, if you notice this, it's a misperceptions index, who's most wrong. We are number 3 among the most wrong, okay, out of all these. And and it's coupled with the results of another survey, next please, which shows that, okay, next, who are the most confident of their knowledge, and we are also number 3. Okay, I think we're the only country that made the top 5 in both surveys. So not only are we the most ignorant, but we're the most confident in our ignorance. Okay, so for those of us who are teachers, educators, journalists, and anyone who has to do with trying to raise public awareness or who believe in the truth, this is something that's really worrisome. This is a trend that is just going to continue if we don't stop what is already going on. Next, please. All right, so as far as what we're doing, because when Maitel sent us a bunch of questions, and one of them was, what is your organization doing? Well, we've had some campaigns, obviously far from enough, but we started several years ago with a Think Before You Click campaign, meaning just don't share, just don't click, just don't retweet. You have to think about what you're doing, even if you're online, because it can come back to haunt you, and it can actually do a disservice to the public. Next, please. But more recently, okay, this is another example of something this is pointed out in the video earlier. I think somebody had an exam the next day and circulated this a year-old walang pasok. This means no class. Okay, next please. If you notice, the timestamp is 2016. You know, in Facebook, memories will pop up things that you post a year earlier. So somebody's Facebook probably reminded him that a year ago you shared this, and maybe it's time to share it again. Okay, so it was widely reshared on July 4, 2007, but if you check the timestamp, it was July 4, 2016. So the danger to this is not just misinforming everyone. And in fact, my brother-in-law called off offices in his company based on our walang pasok, this fake walang pasok posting. So it's not just misinforming the public, but it's ruining the credibility of our brand. So this has a huge repercussions, not just in terms of a disservice to the public, but it's actually undermining the credibility of established and mainstream news brands that are really interested in just spreading true information. Next, please. All right. The other thing we're doing is something that we've been sharing since early on. We started a show last month called Fact or Fake, hosted by, not coincidentally, the reporter who covers President Duterte. Joseph Morong, one of our most respected and senior journalists. And if you'll indulge me, I want to share just 3 minutes of this, and then I'll wrap up. But before I begin the video, we've produced 6 episodes. We intend to continue the series, and we want to make it available to everyone for non-commercial purposes. So if you want a copy, the control room has. You can just bring your USB there, and they'll download it for you within the next couple of days before the conference closes. So if we can just start the video, and I hope we're connected to the audio. All right, next please. Okay.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Fact or Fake. May tanong ako sa inyo, did you ever have a very embarrassing picture and incriminating video on the net? Kumbaga, from wacky to wasak. Nag-post, pinost, nagsisi. We're going to discuss that. But first, we have, what? Fake news alert.
Just in, nagpakamatay matapos kumalat ng scandal video.
This story, pwedeng alam nyo na. Pwedeng alam nyo na rin yung pangalan ng babaeng involved. Alam namin ang kanyang name, but we want to protect her, kaya namin blinip. And we don't want to amplify the abuse. What we want to focus on is this. This story, fact or fake?
Three things to note here, guys. Una, yung picture ng wake, screen grab lang yan mula sa isang GMA News report. Halatang tinapalan lang ng graphics. And if you click on the video, walang news report whatsoever, kundi lalabas ang video ng isang babaeng nag-twerk. Kung sisilipin mo yung About Us ng PresidentDuterteNews.com, they claim to be a media and news website. Pero may disclaimer rin that they make no assurances as to the accuracy of their content.
Third and most important thing to note, buhay siya at ang headline na yan, hindi totoo.
And it doesn't stop there. Ginawa pa nilang developing story ang pagkalat ng sensitive video. May fake article na arestado na raw ang nagpakalat ng video. Not true. At isa pang article tungkol daw sa manandalaga. Eto na naman tayo. Una, hindi city ang Albay. Probinsya ito, so meron itong governor, hindi mayor. Pangalawa, walang government official sa Albay na ganun ng pangalan. At ang totoo, ayaw na magsalita ng pamilya tungkol sa issue. To be fair, we tried to contact the authors of the website PresidentDuterteNews.com. Pero hanggang ngayon, wala pa rin silang reply.
Since na-mention yung name ni President Duterte, we're going to call the spokesperson of the President, si presidential spokesperson Harry Roque. Hi, sir. Sir, yung isang website na tinitingnan namin, ang kanyang URL is presidentdutertenews.com. Question is, ito ba ay official?
Well, obviously hindi yan official, no? Ang official lamang ay yung galing sa PCOO, tsaka galing sa Office of the Spokesperson, tsaka siguro PMS, no? Pero pag hindi nanggaling yan doon sa tatlong opisina na yan, obviously yan po ay gawa-gawa lang na ating mga kababayan, no? At hindi po yan inibigay ng basbas ng Office of the President.
So what do you think of those websites who use the name of the President or yung apelido niya?
Yan naman kasi yung nature ng internet, no? Basta ikaw yung makapag-save ng domain, po pwede kang gumamit ng domain. Wala naman kasi requirement na ipakita mo na kung pangalan yun na ikaw yung tao na may ganyang kapangalan, no? Nagbabayad lang yan ng $10 at nakukuha na yung domain.
Alright. So, hindi official yun, sir, no?
Hindi po talaga official yan, no? Thank you po.
Bye-bye. Thank you, sir.
All
This
right, we can
statement
end
was
it
from the
there.
family,
Sorry. Yes,
made
Steve, you
through
can stop and go back to the PowerPoint I just showed you because I know some of you are dying. We're dying to hear the voice of Harry Roque. Anyway, I'm just wrapping up here. I remind my colleagues, really the best way of fighting fake news next is just to keep improving our journalism and earn the public's trust. I mean, it was discussed earlier that, there was really a vacuum and it was filled by a lot of this hateful and false content on the internet. So we just have to level up. My colleagues and I just have to level up. And news consumers, the public also has to level up in terms of just sharpening its own skills for telling what's the difference between fact and fake. Next, please. All right, so these are some of the other things that we've been doing. We're updating our verification tools and protocols. You'll be hearing from First Draft, I think, today, and also Ian Martin, I think. We're tightening the workflows so that we're much more careful. It was that video earlier on President Duterte was, it was the greatest hits, no? But every day is a challenge to tell, what's real and what we should be broadcasting. We need to educate our audience, and that's part of the reason we're having this. Collaborate and not just compete. One of the silver linings in this crisis is that it's really forced competitors to collaborate. It's forced a lot of people who maybe didn't have much contact with each other to start working together. And this conference is one is a result of that kind of collaboration. Previously, I really didn't have much interaction with our competition, but ever since the Duterte administration has really brought us together. So, thank you, President Duterte. Thank you very much, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Howie. I have Maria.
Sure. So I've loved listening to everyone, and like Howie, I will say thank you, John, for he just in one post just laid everything out, done already. So thank you for bringing us in. Let me pull up. So from the two panels this morning, and I think from what you've heard, I differ in only two things. And I'm going to add three because I'm going to disagree with Howie that it is just good journalism that will fix this. Number one is that it's exponential. It's technology. We haven't spoken about technology much. It is not beyond. We cannot stop and think. It is meant to stop us from thinking. Number two, it is governments taking advantage of this, not normal people. Not even in the study that came out over the weekend, not even in James Ong. And that study looks at operators. The operators are only the ants that are doing it, and by far the worst is government. FreedomHouse.org came out last November with a study that said out of 65 countries they've studied around the world, 30 countries, freedom, democracy as we know it, has rolled back. So I'll show you some of that here. And then finally, I think the last one is, no matter how good journalists we are, no matter how smart our audience is, this will attempt to recreate your vision of reality. And we will, at different times, fall for it because it plays to the weaknesses of human nature. It's cognitive bias, right? So, and I'll go back to technology on that. It's social media, and I will begin and end it with Facebook. So let me can I pull up the presentation, please? This isn't about fake news or journalism. It is about information warfare. And this is something that began way, way, way before technology came along, but it's been pushed up much more. Let's go to the next slide. This is Yuri Andropov. He was KGB chairman from 1967 to 1982, so you know, right? 1967 to 1982. He said this: disinformation works like cocaine. If you sniff once or twice, it may not change your life. If you use it every day, though, it will make you into an addict, a different man. I thought it was ironic given our drug war and our disinformation campaigns. So we are different, and Howie just showed you how different. We are very confident in our ignorance. And that is largely brought up by the fact that this machinery that's been put in place is aimed to cripple your traditional sources of trust and credibility. And that can be journalism, that can be politicians, that can be human rights groups. This is meant to make you so tired that you will just throw your hands up in the air and say, well, I don't know anyway. And in the absence of that, then it is the megaphone, the person who holds the megaphone who wins. So let's go to the next one. So Russia. Let's look here. Ben Nemo works with Atlantic. He writes, Facebook on political ads from Russia, quote, appeared to focus on amplifying divisive social and political messages. It is not just happening in the Philippines, it is happening everywhere around the world, including the United States. This is an update that came from Facebook. They reported that it's hitting the fracture lines of society. Click again. Compare that with the Russian military doctrine on using, and look at this phrase, the protest potential of the population. In 1983, it led to people power. This one, imagine that it's just exponentially fast. And let's look at the Russian military doctrine. Click again, please. There's the Russian military doctrine. And you'll see this phrase. It's part of the military doctrine, information warfare. 15A, characteristic features and specifics of current military conflicts. Current military conflicts, integrated employment of military force and political, economic, informational, or other non-military measures implemented with a wide use, and here's that quote, of the protest potential of the population. So this sets the landscape. The first panel asked, you know, why do we have great popularity for the president? Part of it is because of disinformation. Next one. So what we've done is to look at the Ukraine, which actually, starting in 2014, had to deal with Russian disinformation. Remember, Russia first focused it on its people, and then it focused it on everyone else. And what we learned from mapping and quantifying political information and warfare, this is a database in the Ukraine, that here's the upside. We can survive and come out better, because somehow the Ukraine was able to do it, but it requires us doing exactly what we are doing today. We need to understand that the world has fundamentally changed, and someone is trying to break into your brain and into your hearts. That's what's happening now. Okay, so next one. I can give you these URLs later if you'd like. We can tweet them. So what we did last November, this is the woman. Margot is head of this stopfake.org from the Ukraine, super young. We started talking to her about what they were going through. Philip Howard heads the computational propaganda at Oxford University. And then we were brought in from the Philippines, because this is three groups that are fighting disinformation. And Madeleine Albright, it was a random thing that we all wore red. But I think it was just because we're at war, you know, regardless of which country you're in. The same day we got this Democracy Award, Russia-backed Facebook post. Let's click one more. This was the headline in the US. Russia-backed Facebook posts reached 126 million Americans during the US elections. And that only happened because the US, the Senate Intelligence was doing a hearing, and then the House Judiciary was doing a hearing on Facebook, Twitter, and Google, right? The tech platforms. Guys, the tech platforms are determining our reality right now. They've taken away our powers as gatekeepers. Next. Here are your actors and motivators. These are the different groups, and this comes from a US study. I can share that with you as well. The first are the true believers, people who really believe, whether it's for Trump or for Duterte or whoever it is, right? Or in Mexico, for example, the bots were so many that they started calling them Peña bots after the president of Mexico. Geopolitical state, this is where you can get manipulated. Then there are people who just do it for financial gain. That's what Craig Silverman did. They showed there were these kids in the Macedonia who were gaming the US elections because they wanted money. Then there are ones, number 4, are the people who do it for reputation. These are the guys behind the scenes who have their boutique agencies that will promise you social media engagement, or that will promise you they'll take care of your political accounts, right? And they build up their reputation because there's a feedback loop, right? The more likes they get, the more it is. So financial, reputation. The 5th, entertainment. Some of the kids who are just like, some of the worst threats and attacks I've gotten come from young boys who were just there because they were part of the propaganda machine, and then they then hear it repeated so frequently that that becomes their reality, and then they repeat it again. So it's self-perpetuating. And then finally, the last one, for people who don't have power, and we have so many in our country, there really is a wide gap between the rich and the poor, and there are many. The trickle-down effect didn't trickle down enough. This is global. So there are people who join this kind of cascade, the trolling factory, because they gain power. I took down Lila de Lima, right? So I can give you more on this and show you the study. Next slide. This is the machine. This now is the database where we took, we showed you at the Senate hearing, I showed you how we discovered the disinformation campaigns. This is where we have roughly 12 to 13 million Facebook accounts, now it's about 350 million comments. All of these on the left side are the fake news site. In the middle are the Facebook pages that share those fake news sites. And then you can see here the total shares, unique days, unique groups, unique links, and average reposting. Let me show you an example. This is a tool we built for our social media team. Let's click this. And you can see in October of 2016, this is what it looks like. If you go down, you can see Sally Matai. She's my favorite account because she posted 17.5 times every single post. This is what she was posting in October of 2016. You can see it's a cut and paste, right? Straight cut and paste in all of these different pages. And here is where she posts. Look at the groups where she posts. These are the pages that were used during the campaign, not just of President Duterte, but also if you go further down, you're going to see, this is the first time we saw the accounts of Bongbong Marcos also being used in the same kind of ecosystem. It was there. Then you can also type in, so our social media team doesn't have to spend so much time on Facebook. We can type a name in, and then you can look at what has that account posted on Facebook. Very rudimentary UI lang siya. Ito, you can see the difference between Sally Matai and Thinking Pinoy, right? So this one gives us an idea of data. It treats data. So what else can we use data for? Well, our data scientists can tell us that you can look at which networks spread what. So what we know is that everything you do online stays online even after you delete it. You can actually still find it. So let's take a look. Next slide. This is data of an attack last year, #LennyLeaks. The attack was in January of 2017, very early in the year, but the same network was used to attack news groups and journalists, and that same network you can see. So this is #LennyLeaks. Now, when you take these numbers, and don't worry, because I don't sit there and go through, when you take them, you can map them. Let's go to the next slide. This is what it looks like, and this I showed at the Senate hearing. This is the attack, the community that trended the attack, or tried to trend the attack, #LennyLeaks against Lenny Robredo. What was interesting is that to actually get out of this, it was Martin Andanar, the head of the PCOO, who took it out of this landscape and moved it forward. So who are they? These are the content creators of this. It was, for the pseudo-intellectual, let's call the ABC, for the SAS, this account. Middle class is that account. I try not to say their names. And then the last one is that account, mass base, right? So you can see the vector analysis of the community. And again, I can change this to #ArrestMariaRessa or any of the attacks against news groups, and you will see the same network. Here's the ecosystem. This is the foundation of the information ecosystem we have in the Philippines today. Out of that, it jumps into the next step, which is click again, please. It moves to traditional media. And I think now traditional media, we're smarter about not being used, but we actually helped empower a lot of the propaganda accounts because we didn't know, right? So now we have to tell our people. Here it jumps. Sass is one of the columnists for there. Again, I'll be attacked for this. Hi, you can attack now. Go ahead. So it moves into traditional media. In #LennyLeaks, it was actually Secretary Andanar who amplified the attacks by SAS and Thinking Pinoy. It didn't move out, but the minute that a secretary then takes it, traditional news tends to pick it up, right? And some did, and that was how #LennyLeaks happened. After this, of course, I mentioned, next slide, PCOO. And this, to me, April of last year, I think Martin and I were in a Facebook conference in Hong Kong, and he had told me, I'm going to be really excited because we're going to send PNA to China and Russia for training. I said, Martin, you don't want to do that. So they're going there. And then finally, this last one, of course, the whole loop was closed by just appointing the mass-based anchor of the propaganda machine into government itself, handling social media. So is this government, is it state-sponsored trolling? Absolutely. And there's, if you look at how much of our tax money is going into this, you can see that they tripled their budget from last year to this year. I'm going to leave you with just this one last slide that I always end with. Let's go to the last slide and click again. It's Mark Zuckerberg. Our public space is Facebook. We live on Facebook. 97% of Filipinos who are on the internet are on Facebook. You're talking roughly 58 million to 60 million of us there. And we have no idea what truth is anymore because of the algorithms of Facebook. All of this data I've given to them. We all know the journalists' pages are taken down, but yet none of these rape attacks are really ever taken down. So I continue to appeal to Facebook. Facebook, you have to help ensure that our democracy survives and continues to grow. Because Facebook will be here in the long term. I think that's one of the things we can do. We need to make sure that we don't fight technology, that we work with it, but for us to try to sexify our stories, for us to try to be better journalists, doesn't matter how good a journalist you are. That gatekeeper will determine whether or not you even get your foot out the door. Thanks.
Thank you very much to all three. If you guys have questions, please send your questions to the lovely ladies in green on the right. No? In the meantime, is it? Oh, there's a question already. All right. Duterte has been shutting his media enemies by hitting them where it hurts. Hurts most, their bottom line. No? How do you push back when you have Duterte mobilizing his moneyed allies to shut down his critics, considering the fact that good journalism costs money? Who would like to take that? John, would you like to take that?
You up first? I can. So yeah, I guess I will. So number one, journalism is being attacked, not just on if you're critical or if you ask questions. I actually would say Rappler's very middle of the road. We are not critical, we just ask the questions. But we're facing it on two fronts, what I call impunity. There's impunity on the government side, and then there's also impunity on Facebook and Google's side in terms of what they're doing, and the economic parts are also on both sides. So Facebook and Google take this, last year, took about 85% of the digital revenues in the Philippines. Globally, you're talking at least an average of 90%, right? So even as these types of information warfare operations are going on, that actually only serves Facebook's interests because that increases engagement on Facebook, which then chokes the economic line to real news groups, as in people who have to create content. No, let's say journalism, because people who create content also create it for the propaganda machine. So that's one. The second thing is that you survive by, I always use this, please don't get tired of it. I always say we hold the line and we do different things. We've tried, you talked a little bit in the first panel and the second panel about what things can be done. Rappler began a crowdfunding campaign. And the crazy thing is it wasn't something that we did very conscientiously. I wanted to know whether people cared about journalism. And that was really to give us a sense of who are the people who care enough. And I was very pleasantly surprised that, it is according to my friends in the tech world, it is the largest crowdfunding campaign that's happened in the Philippines. Certainly, by no stretch of the imagination, enough to maintain a news group. If you look to the West, the New York Times actually said that it hit 60% now of its revenues from membership and from subscriptions. So subscriptions, that's one of the things I'm sure we're all going to have to do. But that, again, will separate our societies between the haves and the have-nots. So we have to find a balance. John, you have thoughts.
No,
I'm sure you have thoughts about this.
let's have other questions.
Do you have a response for this one?
Well, basically, it's a difficult time for all media, especially commercial media that wants to retain its independence. There's often this boast that these bloggers and people on social media are replacing the functions of mainstream media, and therefore we're becoming obsolete. We're noticing that when it comes to political news, they do get a substantial audience, but not everything is political news. And what we've noticed is that when people really need information, including life and death information, when there's a disaster, when there's a typhoon, people don't go to Mocha Uson's blog for information. You know, they still go to mainstream media. They go to the established news media. So, you know, as long as we still make an effort to be essential and relevant, and that includes politics as well, because you know we still call a spade a spade. We're not. We make it a point to be, not to be partisan, and that's really part of our branding.
Can I add, you need real journalists more than ever in our region, because, and I'll add to what Howie said, it's not just the politics of it. Talk about these 2 Reuters journalists who were jailed in Myanmar for just finding photos of 10 young men who were slaughtered. So we're not there, but that took real journalists, and they are in prison for 14 years now because they did that. So these are some of the things. I think in Southeast Asia, what you're seeing is a rollback of democracy. Actually, yesterday, was it with Cherry? And I was saying, it looks like Singapore may be the one to fight for democracy in the geopolitical landscape now.
Right. Okay. And this one is rather difficult to answer. So, if disinformation is so systemic and it is even state-sponsored, will we still be able to make a dent now that the truth is also a hard sell coming from this morning's session? Is it possible for us to even use the same model, or how hard will it be to find another model? So,
You guys have to.
Well, all I can say is, it depends on how strong we push back and insist on the value of what we do. The fact that there's a lot of interest in this subject. I mean, we get requests for talks almost every day, and there's been a lot of interest in this conference. I think that's got to make a dent. But the thing is, it's got to spread way beyond the intellectual centers of Ateneo and UP, etc., and spread throughout the country. But we just can't stop, because this is going to be a long struggle.
I'm going to back Howie up with more oomph. Guys, this is the battle. The lines are drawn. I was just telling a friend, I came from Yangon, Myanmar, just last night, and I talked to a friend of mine who was thrown into prison for 8.5 years on trumped-up charges, and yet he came back out and is again a journalist fighting for what's right. And I asked him, I said, why do you keep doing that? And he said, because it isn't right. So, very clearly, we are in a much better place because we're coming from a tradition of free press, a tradition of democracy that our parents, actually me pa rin, kami rin pa rin, our generation came to the end of this, right? Do you want to give that up that easily? That's one. The second one is, journalists now, more than ever, are necessary because there is so much trash. There is so much, it is meant to make you disbelieve. So do not fall for it. The reason why you're in this room is most likely because of that. And finally, we only get to do this once. We give up, we give in, the country fundamentally changes.
Well, on that cheery note, I'd like to add a few of my own thoughts. I think it's important to keep some things in perspective. First, only about 55% of the Philippine population has access to the internet. It's important to keep that in mind because there are millions of Filipinos who have no idea what we're talking about. Second, it's also important to keep in mind that we are, at this time, recording our all-time highs in traffic. Our newspaper print circulation might be just stable, but that's already a feat in itself. But online traffic, it's going great guns. So this talk about not trusting mainstream media, I think we've talked about this before. I mean, the numbers don't necessarily bear that out. Our audiences have grown by at least twice in the last 2 or 3 years. And then I think well, maybe just those two. I think that would be enough to, just for us to keep some things in perspective.
Okay, this question for Maria. How can Facebook help democracy survive while protecting freedom of speech? Can you elaborate on your appeal to Facebook?
Oh gosh, I have so many. Well, for one, the data is there, right? Facebook has the data, and it took the Senate hearings and the House Judiciary hearings to make them tell Americans that they actually served Russian disinformation to 124 million. In the Philippines, we showed you the impact of 26 fake accounts, that it can ripple to 3 million others. Based on that data, I was told that part of the reason they were able to take down 30,000 fake accounts in the French presidential elections was because they looked at what was happening in the Philippines. 30,000 fake accounts during the French elections. Imagine if they didn't take down those accounts, would Macron have won, right? Number one. Number two is, in their filings, they actually say that the Philippines is beyond the average number of fake accounts. They know it, but they still haven't taken action. I've lots of friends in Facebook, and you know that I've spoken to you about this, so that I feel very comfortable telling everyone else about it as well. I think that they have to look at their algorithms, because they've decided that popularity is fact. Popularity is truth, and that's not true. Oftentimes, facts are the most unpopular things, but in the past, if you're pro or you're anti, here we are in the middle meeting to talk to each other, because that's what democracy is about. We listen and convince each other. But right now, the algorithms of Facebook actually tear you further apart than before, right? So if John is pro Duterte and Howie is anti, his community would push him even further out, pro Duterte, and his community would push him even further out, and there's no space for democracy. So the question on the other one of how are we going to evolve this, it's a combination of Facebook coming in and understanding that news groups, that they can't treat the New York Times the same way they would treat a Trump for President blog. Okay, that's one. Finally, I think the last part here is, Facebook is an American company. They care more. They get more ARPUs in the West than they do in the Philippines, although greatly, we are Facebook's largest market. Did you know that? We're Facebook's largest market. So for me, again, you have tremendous power on your Facebook feed. Let Facebook know what you want. They announced 2 algorithm changes in January, and both of those algorithm changes, I am convinced, will empower the propaganda machine and actually cut into the power of traditional news groups. In other parts of the world, traffic of news groups have gone down 40 to 60%. So this is gonna get worse before it gets better. So get ready for it.
Okay, thank you. This is actually a question for Maria, but I think it would be good for all of you. No? How can journalism grow in the swamp of knowledge known as the Duterte regime, full of hard-headed supporters, slaves, and ignorant passers-by? So I guess in the current information landscape, how can journalism flourish?
I think that both Howie and Maria have already outlined some of the things that we need to do. In a word, we need to keep doing what we've been doing for as long as we can keep doing it. We need to improve at the craft of talking to our sources, of engaging our communities, and of making an impact. Please don't mistake some of the things that we say to mean that we think journalism is beyond reproach. That is not, in fact, true. We are among the first. In fact, we started meeting years ago because we wanted to improve ourselves and our profession. So there's this thing. We know that we make mistakes, and we want to get better at doing our job, so we make fewer mistakes and mistakes with less impact. So that's one of the things that we need to do. But I do agree with Maria that it can't be just back to the basics. There is something fundamentally new about the information ecosystem now. And whether we like it or not, some people will determine our fates. So it's a structural thing, it's a technological thing, and in the Philippines, it might become a cultural thing if we don't watch out. So we need to be able to do something else beyond better journalism. And that is, going out, listening to more people. I think maybe I can just end on this note. Journalists need to come to terms with the reality that the news is not something that only we can define. We've used the phrase citizen journalists. We can say, we can refer to acts of journalism that amateurs might commit every now and then. They happen to be at an accident and then document it and so on and so forth. But the point is that there are other ways that news is defined, and I think that the traditional media should welcome that as well.
Would you like to add?
Sorry, one thing on the economic side, I think one of the things news groups can do is ask Facebook to pay for news content. That could be one that would then move into different an algorithm with changes in the algorithm. How can we change this? Exactly what we're doing now. I have never spent as much time talking about technology and journalism as I have in the last year and a half. And it isn't just here in the Philippines. I think it's global. And seeing the global landscape only makes me realize that we are at the front of all of this. President Duterte was elected about 6 months before President Trump. So what you're seeing in the United States is an echo of what we've already lived through. So self-awareness. Okay, let me be positive. Because in the end, I'm an optimist, right? I hope that if we all come together and demand accountability. We went through a Senate hearing. Grace Poe comes out with a bill that says public officials should be held to higher standards. That's a normal thing in the past, wasn't it? When did we slip? I mean, when was it okay to not? But yet we have a bill now, so that's good. I think this isn't a journalist's battle alone, nor is it only students or academic community. This is our society's battle, every single one. It isn't always so easy to stand up and say, hey, I disagree with you, even if you have the money to run after me or to shut my business down. Or it's a power and money again, right? But then we go down to what is it where you are going to hold the line so that you maintain the democracy we've gotten used to. We ask you to work with us on this because we're certainly going to be holding the line.
All right, I just want to add something about technology. I think a lot of the despair that people feel is based on what they're reading online, especially Facebook. And I think if all this negative sentiment, all this hate, actually reflects the real world, I mean, people like us wouldn't be able to walk around malls anymore, right? We'd be like lynched every time we leave our homes. But we know how a lot of this hatred and trolling is fueled. I mean, I think there's going to be a discussion about the study about how a lot of it is being orchestrated. I mean, my own encounters with people have kind of given me a different perspective. Just a few months ago, I was invited to Davao, and I've been to Mindanao several times in the past year to do stories, and it always makes me nervous because I too read Facebook a lot, and I get bashed and trolled, etc. But it always surprises me how pleasant people still are in the real world. I mean, they may disagree with you politically in the real world, but they're more polite about it. I don't know if I encounter the same people online, but it's like they might have a different personality in the real world, or a lot of the hatred is really artificial. A lot of it is artificial, or it's both. It's both artificial, and people kind of are you know, there's a what is it, Mr. Jekyll and Dr. Hyde, or Mr. Hyde and Dr. Maybe there's a kind of a split personality that people have, and once they're online, they're suddenly full of this rage, and then once they meet you in person, they kind of just kiss you or something.
Right. It seems, though, that we have actually a few more minutes, so maybe about 2 more questions, if you have them. No? I do? 10 more minutes? Okay. Now, so we have space for 1 more question, and then perhaps some final words from the panel. No? It seems as if perhaps the genie is out of the bottle thanks to technology. No? Is it actually a matter of controlling the conversation, or finding a way for the conversation to take place or taming the internet, if you will, no, into a space where actually public debate can actually take place?
I believe that a lot of this is manufactured to unleash the inner demons of people who have real anger. And that manufactured part is the part that we need to worry about, number one. Number two, when was it okay to get away with it also, right? There's impunity online for people to say, not just, I hate Maria Ressa because she's ugly. I mean, it's okay, you can say anything you want, but also then to say libelous things that should not be allowed and yet is allowed. Who's responsible for that? Is it going to be Facebook? Can we sue Facebook? They're not going to want to do that. I go back to fundamental things. Again, I think the environment has changed so fast that we're now seeing the data. The data is very clear. And I'll correct another misperception. While there are more than 2 sides, number one, and what the propaganda machine wants you to think is that there are only 2 sides and that it is monolithic. There is pro-Duterte and then the Dilawans. It's a paper tiger, right? It's not true because, frankly, Liberal Party was kind of dead for a period of time. It didn't exist. They all joined the ruling party, and it's a very, very small opposition. Same online. Our data shows us this is a propaganda machine that evolved from the campaign machinery of both President Duterte and Senator Marcos, then Senator Marcos. That's what the data shows. And, you can slice and dice it anyway. You can say it a million times that it's also the other side. Guess what, folks? That's what the data shows. Did I say that enough times? I'm going to stop now.
Yeah. All right, yeah. But the issue, though, is, for example, for citizens who do participate in these conversations, but it is as if the conversation has been taken over by. So how can perhaps your suggestions for how citizens may be able to reclaim their internet, reclaim their Facebook?
First, I think they should reclaim their traditional media. Maybe subscribe to newspapers again. Pay for paywalls and so on. We're making jokes, but that is in fact a serious thing, right? Real journalism takes an investment of time and money, and that costs. And we need our audience to be with us. In 1999-2000, there was an advertising boycott of the newspaper that I worked for, again instigated by allies of the president at the time. And one of the most heartening things that happened was that when the news broke, our own readers and subscribers took to the streets. They didn't protest, but they had creative ways of showing support for the newspaper. And I thought that was a real. That was something, and there was a real connection with our audience, with our public. But I think we need to evolve as a news organization, not just the Inquirer, but all the other news organizations. We need to see our audience as a public as well as and also as a source of information itself. So again. For instance, just talking about definitions of credibility, why would you read newspaper X instead of website Y, part of the answer is it's the credibility. But I think we need to evolve and accept that definitions of credibility have also changed. It's not just we are able to give you accuracy of information, or we make an impact, we set the agenda, and so on and so forth. For some people, just being available is already a criterion of credibility. Oh, why do you read Z? Because they're always there. I think that's, we might not like it, but we need to evolve in that direction, because that's what the audience and the public are telling us.
Can I quickly? So first, I'll give you 3 steps. Number 1, you have to get rid of the apathy, because the first step may be that, oh, it's only the journalist's problem. It's actually not mine. It will ultimately become yours. It already is yours. So the first is that. Second is, if you want a safe space, build your own communities. So if you already accept that, it's like Buddhism. Buddhism starts with this saying, if you accept that all life is suffering, you're going to be very happy. Diba? So if you accept that you can't be apathetic and you're going to have to actually wade in for facts, to fight for the facts, then you can build communities. And I would think that what's happened is that the globally authoritarian types of leaders have gamed it better than real people who have real jobs. And so now this is a battle. And then third is collaborate. You're seeing 3 of us. I know ABS is here also. All of the news groups are together in trying to veer files. We each have a stake in this, but we also know that that it comes down to you and how much you believe in the type of system of governance that we have. For every time unofficial crosses the line, come and let us know. That's the first step in your own communities, right? So, because there are so many of these instances.
This is not something that we just stumble on. Okay, maybe something that we mistakenly press. Now, this is something that is deliberately put together. That's one. It's a deliberate act. Number two, it is disguised in the news format. It makes it look like it was a real GMA news website or something else. It is disguised as news. And then thirdly, and the third D, it is meant to deceive. There is a difference between satire, for instance. We all watch the fake news on Comedy Central, for instance. Okay, but it's deliberate. They obviously put time and money into it, and then they make up things. But the point is to enlighten the public. The point of fake news is it's designed to deceive us, and that's where the danger lies. Thank you.
I'll build on what John said and leave you with 3 points. The first is I see so much history in this room, both of our nation and of my career path as a journalist, the probers who are here from. Did you know Maitel was with Probe? How a long time. So for me, you have the definition. I am optimistic that knowing what the landscape looks like, knowing the data. I go back, we need data scientists and we need the academic community to tell us more so that we can do more, because as we are under attack, as the journalists are under attack, the news groups are under attack, then everyone, the academic community, can certainly do. The study that you will hear about tomorrow came from the academic community. We need to build on each other. The third point is that the data is alarming, but the next generation is where we will have hope, because I think so many of them now are aware of this. And Howie's right, in a year and a half, a lot has changed, and it shifted from silence. We did have a spiral of silence. I'll use Clarissa David's word, from August 2016 to August 2017. And what stopped it in August 2017 were the deaths of 3 teenage boys. And then Filipinos came back alive online. So fan the flames. It is not pro or anti any one person. I have never believed in that. It is about demanding good governance and constitutional processes. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Howie, John, Maria. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's answer panel 4. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to our panel and our moderator.